What's up, everyone? It's Justin, and today I'm going to talk about sideboard cards that you have to include for next week's Galactic Championship. I think everyone is working on final deck lists, getting ready. The time is here, right? We're going to be hopping on planes and traveling to Las Vegas next week. But don't include your sideboard cards. This is a big part of the game. You play, at least one sideboard game every match, and sometimes two. So it's really important to include some powerful cards that can make or break your deck as you analyze the meta. So what me and my team have been doing is we're really looking at sideboards to figure out matchups. A matchup that might be bad, you're able to put a couple cards in your sideboard, and all of a sudden you can flip that matchup to a point that maybe you can even feel good about the matchup overall, right? You're a 70% underdog game one, but then you're able to flip it and be almost unlosable post board. So I'm going to talk about just various sideboard cards that have that impact and things that you have to include in your deck in order to be successful. So the first one, it's sort of a throwback to the last meta, which is really upgrade hate. With the Force coming on and some powerful cards like Darth Vader coming around, there's been less of an emphasis on upgrades, but upgrades are still super powerful. We've seen the upgrade leaders like Vader and Boba Fett being really strong, and other cards like the Darksaber in Sabine. Pilot upgrades that aren't leaders, but like cards like Iden and um, Chewbacca are still going to potentially just run away with the game if you don't answer them. So upgrade hate is still really important to include. We're also seeing some of the Force decks play cards like the lightsaber that goes on Sith units or Jedi units from set one. We're seeing things like General's Blade. So you're definitely going to want to include at least two, if not three, or more copies of Upgrade Hate in your deck. Disabling Fangfighter and Confiscate are pretty straightforward answers. Um, I do want to highlight Kit Fisto's Aether Sprite. It's a new card. I'm really high on this card. It destroys all upgrades first of all, which is great, but it's also just a very reasonable unit. I qualified for the Galactic for day two of the Galactic Championships using Sabine Data Vault and played multiple copies of Senatorial Corvette, which had the 5/4 for 5 space unit. When it dies, discard a card. This is a similar statted unit. One more defense, one less power. Also a Saboteur, and doesn't have the discard ability, but has this very relevant ability. So I think this card is really good. I think it's super strong in like Han decks because you can play it discounted and still trade with cards like Millennium Falcon and other space units. So I think Kit Fisto's Aether Sprite should probably be like one or two of in the red white decks. And then you still want a couple copies of Disabling Fangfighter because you want that early, especially against like a General's Blade or Chewbacca. Bamboozle, I think, is actually really, really good right now. It's great. It's sort of that surprise impact of that it's always been. But being able to turn off a General's Blade on turn two against the green Force decks is great. Being able to destroy Vader Leader is huge. I think Vader's got kind of a target on its back, and a lot of the sideboard cards make it even better, make the matchups even better. So Bamboozle's great there. It's also a trick, and it has the free ability. So if you're playing a deck like Cad Bane, you can actually include this in your deck between Jabba and being able to pitch a yellow card and play it for free. So as I'm designing my sideboard, I think the number for upgrade hate is going to be three. Obviously, that can change, but I don't think I would go below three. All right. If there was ever a powerful sideboard card, Bombing Run is it. Certainly, such a polarizing card against the Darth Vader decks. Darth Vader was the Darth Vader space decks. Kind of one of the breakout decks from the Minnesota regional. It didn't win. I'm not even sure it top aided, but it was definitely present there. My teammate Mike Cham played it, Bobby Sapphire, a bunch of the other teams played it and had really good success and good win rates with it. It's won a bunch of PQs, the Vader deck. But I think there is that concern about Bombing Run. And one of the things about sideboards right now is that they're not super strained. The main decks are really good. You don't need to sort of extend your main deck that much into your sideboard, so you have some space to say, you know what, I don't want to lose to Vader. I'm going to throw three bombing runs in my deck. We're also seeing red as just a really powerful color in set 5 meta in general between Han Solo. Um, you've got other red combinations that are really strong. So I think you're going to see Bombing Run played at a heavy number. Um, I think there's sort of a psychological component here where you say to yourself, well, I've got sideboard. I've got, my upgrade hate is 3 cards. And I might have a few kind of some spiciness in there, right? I want to save like 2 sort of real special sauce cards for the sideboard, the kind of like blowout cards. But other than that, kind of what I was saying, it's not super strained. So like you can easily just play 3 bombing runs. Maybe you play Vader, maybe you don't. But if you do, you're gonna say, "Whew, I've got those 3 bombing runs in my deck." And if you do play it, and you say, let's say you only play 2 bombing runs, or you didn't even play any, right? And you play it and you get paired against a Vader, you're gonna feel really bad. So I would not leave the bombing runs at home. Your sideboards aren't that strained anyway, so I would definitely play the max, play against Vader. You're gonna be happy that you have it. All right, here's a card that I think is somewhat. I'm kind of conflicted on this card. Um, the discard effect of Pillage. So discard in general, I think, is an interesting has an interesting role in this game because you're drawing 2 cards. So just straight up stripping their hand isn't always that great because the next turn they play something anyway. Um, and Pillage, costing 4, it takes you off of doing something the turn that you're playing it. So I do think it's pretty good in conjunction with like Kiadi Mundi against, let's say, these blue-green villain decks, right? Um, so I'm not sure Pillage is going to end up in my sideboard. Um, I do think it can steal a game, and if you like that ability, you should include it. The thing that I think is that I struggle with Pillage is you play it, and then the next turn, you're delaying your board presence, and then the next turn they'll most likely just do something. Um, but I do like it against like the very heavy removal blue green villain decks, like an Iden deck. If I was playing against that, I'd want to have as many pillages in my sideboard as possible. So I think pillage is a consideration. Right now, I'm thinking about 2 or 3 of that card if I'm playing it. I sort of want to have the effect, and I don't want to just play 1 pillage, right? So I do think it's very possible this ends up in my sideboard, but I also think this is a card that you could just not play and be fine with just continuing to pressure your control opponents with just playing units after units after units. And one of the reasons I don't necessarily love pillage is this next slide. So I think a sideboard, another viable option is just to play some more bombs. We're seeing that games are very grindy and they go long. Maybe one player. There are games where one player just sort of takes over and presses that advantage until they win. But there's a lot of games in playtesting where one player will play a bomb, someone else will answer it, and then someone else will answer that, and it just sort of goes back and forth. And then at some point, someone kind of falters, and someone else just continues to play these very powerful cards. So I think in sideboards, it's a really strong option to just have like 2 more big cards in your deck. We saw that in Denver. The sectional winner in Denver played 30-point Django and just had more big stuff at the end. He had Emperor Palpatine in his sideboard. He had Cad Bane in his sideboard, and he's kept playing the units over and over again once the game kind of got to the 6th resource turn, 7th resource turn, 8th resource turn. I was like, hey, here's another one. So a card like Palp's Return kind of really capitalizes on that. Emperor Palpatine is really good at that. Chewbacca is really good at that. These sort of multiple effect bombs as well. And that's one of the reasons I don't love Pillage in sort of a grindy mirror, is because the top decks post board will be stronger. People will be adding in potentially strong cards to their deck, like 2 or 3 more big threats. But I do think that I'm leaning towards just having a little bit more top end post board when I want it, so I can win the grindy matchups. All right, this card is incredible, and you're noticing a theme here that a lot of the sideboard cards are red. Red has, I think, between Bombing Run, Pillage, and Cham, has really unique sideboard options, and then it also has the same like Fangfighter and Kit Fisto's Aether Sprite. So the red sideboard gets to really have it all. There's other really good sideboard cards in other colors. You're seeing, Bamboozle, and you're seeing some cards like not Power of the Dark Side, Palpatine's Return. But red has these cards that are just operate a little bit uniquely. Bombing Run has a really unique effect. Cham has a really unique effect. You're going to bring this guy in anytime you see Super Laser Tech, anytime you see Resupply, just being able to bridge that gap, and basically turn your opponent's ramp into your own, while at the same time playing a 5/4, really aggressive stat line for a 4 drop, is super strong. Excuse me. So Cham's a really good card. Once again in red. So now you're starting to see, like, how does your sideboard get constructed? If you're red, let's kind of use that as an example. You're going to want your bombing runs. You're going to want your upgrade hate. You're going to want your Cham. And then it's like, okay, do I go the pillage route or do I go the more bomb route? So I think that's where you would be at for a red sideboard. For other colors, you're going to have more options, because you don't have a Cham and you don't have a bombing run. So if you're not in red, your sideboard is actually like really, really flexible. Just because red does sort of almost push you towards playing these powerful sideboard cards like Cham and Bombing Run. All right, here's the next one. I think we're seeing the Turret unit, not the leader, sadly, but the Turret unit is a roadblock for a lot of aggressive decks. Sabine, as I've been testing Sabine, has been really challenging to get over Turret when they play a 3/5. Just, the ability to shrink your attackers and then attack with a turret to get the force back and shrink the next one is really challenging. But just being able to take the unit off the field right away is really strong. So Force Choke is a card, that you can sideboard, that I think is really powerful, like the Tal's Index, or just really anything that's black and red and has some tempo to it. Takedown is a little bit odd because it's like Takedown's usually viewed as more of like a control card, sort of like, hey, I want to stay alive, and sure, it's less of an issue there. But I could see like a blue base tempo aggressive deck playing a Takedown and saying, you know what, like, I want to kill the 3/5s in general. It's not just Churret that these cards kill. There are other cards. Kira Unit is still going to be an annoying card out of like a Quinlan deck. Um, these two cards actually in general against Quinlan are very good. They kill most of the units that are going to hit the battlefield. And that doing that extra damage. So like there's a card like Open Fire that does 4 damage, but doing the full 5 is really strong right now because there's so many X5 units. So I think you really want to have the ability to have a little bit more removal in your sideboard is a good option as well. All right. Talking a lot about the Force, talking a lot about upgrades. Let's not forget about 2 cards that sometimes really do demand an answer, and you want to have access to them. So Chewbacca is an upgrade, so you can destroy him if he's used if he's used as an upgrade. But sometimes he's just a unit, and there aren't answers to him. So and then there's obviously Lurking TIE Phantom, which actually is like really real placed in the meta right now. It can't be force thrown. And it can kind of avoid a lot of the ground battles that are happening. So you play a Lurking TIE Phantom and you put some upgrades on it, it ends the game very quickly right now. So don't forget about the existence of Lurking TIE Phantom. I've seen some people cutting No Glory only results from their main deck. So it's very possible that this card just should be just in the main of all these control decks as a 3 of. But I think in general, don't forget about the Phantom because it can steal games, and there are decks that can capitalize on the ability of that card. There are leaders that can, you think about a leader like Tarkin right now. Is that sort of a sleeper deck? Is there something in the meta right now that is kind of hiding and is able to break Lurking TIE Phantom? So that's it. All right, next slide. I think this is the last slide. Maybe there's one more after. Is just ambushers in general, but really the space ones I want to discuss first. Eye of Scion is a really cool card. And this is the first slide that has mainly non-red cards, although Mace Windu is still sneaking in. But Eye of Scion, Eager Escort Fighter, sort of being able to play those cards in like a Kylo or a Kira or an Iden control-y deck is really great. The Space Vader deck is a bad matchup, but having a few of these copies can actually bridge you to the next stage of the game where you're able to take control. So Eager Escort Fighter, I think if you're not in red, you'll have space for cards like Eager Escort Fighter and Eye of Scion. So if you're in a blue-green villain shell, these cards should definitely be in your sideboard. Blue Leader is a card that is great if you're playing it. You're probably just playing it main deck, right? Like you're probably playing multiple copies of that main. But if you're Sabine, you should have a couple of those in your sideboard, if not just the full three. Really versatile card. Can pick off a card out of Vader, but can also just be a really good body. And I think that's one of the good thing about some of these sideboard cards that we're talking about is you want them to have that really strong impact to a matchup that you maybe want to gain some points to, right? Like, okay, Blue Leader is good against Vader. But it's also just a really, really good card. Like it's a 3/3. It's also a 5/5 when you want it to be. It's got ambush in both arenas. Like so, the more sideboard cards you can have that are just straight up good in general, the better you're going to be. So I think these space ambushers are really good, and then the ground ambushers to take away the force or to close the game are things that, again, you're probably going to see Maul in main decks. Mace Windu could be a main deck card. Not sure totally how to pronounce this. Tarantatech. We've seen some of that in main deck cards because the Force is such a powerful mechanic. But I think, that first stage of the game where you're kind of setting up, maybe playing a removal spell, maybe playing an early guy, and then your opponent does their thing. If you're able to play an ambush unit and take them maybe off the Force or take the advantage in terms of number of units out, or just close the game damage wise with a Darth Maul, I think you're going to be feeling really good about the middle stages of the game and kind of get you to the next stage, which is just playing these absolute bombs. So it's just funny because you're thinking about Maul maybe not being the most top end now, but Maul is going to take out some units, which are going to lead you to your Avengers and your Devastators. Mace Windu is going to take out some units, which is going to lead you to your Crate Dragons and stuff like that. So I think having those ambushers to kind of, a lot of the games, one player has a marginal advantage. Having an ambusher is great in both sides of that. It's able to maybe bring you back to some parity if you're behind, or if you're ahead, it's able to really push your advantage by having these extra ambushers in your deck. So I really think that having a few of these, and these could sort of maybe take that space of that more bombs category that I talked about earlier, of having a few of your bombs that you're bringing in also be ambush. So that's it. I'm sure I missed some things. I think sideboards in general, there's just so many cards you can include. There's so many different ways to think about them. One of the things I didn't talk about is like bringing upgrades in from your sideboard, right? Like maybe if the meta is less defined now in set 5, we haven't seen a ton of big events, so there's not as many published deck lists. Maybe people have upgrade hate in their sideboard, but they don't bring it in against you because you didn't see any main deck upgrades. You bring them in, you pull the old switcheroo. So I'm sure I've missed a bunch. don't crucify me, but definitely mention some interesting options in the comments that I haven't included. I'd love to hear your perspective. Our deck threads in the KTOD Discord have been really active about just talking about sideboards. I have a few messages I need to respond to in terms of sideboard guides and stuff like that. So, an exciting time for Star Wars Unlimited. One thing I know for a fact is that these cards that I've talked about, a lot of them will make an impact at the Galactic Championships. Cham, Bombing Run, Sable League Fang Fighter. A lot of these cards are going to be seen in sideboards. So, we'll see matches, we'll see streams where someone top decks one of these cards and is able to really press an advantage. All right, that is all for now. I will see you guys in Las Vegas, and we've got some various podcasts popping up. So you'll probably see my face a few more times before Vegas, but I don't have any more just me videos before Vegas. So good luck in your preparation, and I will see you there. Take care, everybody.